Welcome back to the CV Brothers podcast, part 2 of the 5th house. In the last part, we started our story in the wizarding world. The Sorting Hat did something unprecedented. It created a new house at Hogwarts. We also introduced Miles, Hoffnung, and Elie as they were sorted into this newly created house, Briarbuck. This house was created for some unknown reason. The teachers and headmasters decided to teach these special students differently to try to understand why they had been created and possibly change centuries of tradition. Will Miles, Hoffnung, and Elie encounter as they learn and as they graduate? Why was the 5th house created? We will have to find out. I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, leave a comment. If you don't, leave a comment. Now let's hop into the final part of the Wizarding World, the 5th house. When the original first years of Briarbuck House graduated, years later, they went out into the world to save the day. However, they did not find any threats. The world was not in danger, nor was there a war to be fought. There were some efforts of people calling for elf reform and more freedom for other marginalized magical creatures, but this was more of a political fight rather than anything else. They found some scuffles and fights that broke out for seemingly no reason, but nothing more than random fights. They went out into the world to try and find what ills they could stop or what evils needed to be defeated, but they found nothing. Some families ended up using magic a little bit carelessly in front of Muggles, but nothing for Briarbuck to face, nothing to make a difference. For these graduates, there was just life, nothing special. The recently graduated students, without purpose or direction, fell into depression, drunken squalor, and violence. Some even chose to end their own lives. To those students who had dropped out under the pressure years before, under the weight of possibly being the saviors of the magical world, they felt somewhat vindicated and even blamed Hogwarts for putting such a large amount of pressure on the students that were ages 11 and maybe even through 17. Some of those who graduated even went as far as to choose to live as a Muggle and turn their backs on the wizarding world. These individuals opted to use modern technology the Muggles had created by the year 2031 and left their heritage behind completely. One such wizard was Elie Billish. Elie left the magical world behind and found a great man. They fell in love and were married. Over time they had a few kids, but she kept all her magical items from the past hidden in a small compartment in their kitchen, hidden away by a spell of concealment. To most of the world, everything moved on as normal. For Hoffnung, Miles, and one other student, Marcus, they tried to hold out hope and search for some reason, the real reason, that they had been chosen. The reason behind the creation of this 5th house. Over time, the apartment of Miles and Hoffnung began to look like the home of a crazy person. There were scraps of paper covering almost every wall, strings to try to tie events together, back and forth across the apartment. There were many things in the wizarding world that seemed to be out of place, but they also did not fit in with anything else. They heard rumors of an elf revolution. They heard of growing resentment within the wizarding world. The groups of different magical users separating themselves from one another, and even divisions within the Ministry of Magic. There was a free elf movement which seemed to be gathering more and more power with each year. Many of the wizarding world had become complacent with the peace that followed the Second Wizarding War. With the use of Muggle technologies being integrated into the aspect of everyday lives, and the pride of wizards, it caused them to refuse to see what was happening. And this might even cause them to lose their station or control of the wizarding world. One day, while Miles and Hoffnung were investigating the free elf movement, they stumbled upon the thread that connected it all. They found that the movement was a breeding ground for the elf revolution. There was something powerful that was pulling all the strings from behind the scenes. With that power that they had, they were driving everything to a head. Without the knowledge of the wizarding world, tensions had been ramping up for years, preparing for potentially an all-out war. Hoffnung and Miles frantically rushed back to their apartment, but they found it crawling with elves and other magical creatures who were looking for them. In a panic, they apparated over to Marcus's house, but only found the house destroyed and Marcus dead. They realized time was running out, and so they began recruiting every Briarbuck student they could find and placing them at Hoffnung's family home, where there were several layers of magical protection to keep the individuals safe, so that they had a chance to come up with a plan. As more and more people were found, they increased these spells, the runes, and other magical items around the home to hopefully stop the power of the elves and those on their side. Miles and Hoffnung went to recruit Elie, but she refused to join them. She told them she was done with magic. When they pushed back, she quietly stepped out onto her porch to hide the conversation from her family. As they were conversing, however, the three were attacked by elves and other magical creatures. Miles and Hoffnung protected them, but were forced to move back inside of the house. With this attack threatening her family, Elie was forced to reveal her past to her family. She quickly took command and gave orders for Miles to cover them and Hoffnung to watch the back and protect their family. She rushed into the kitchen and found her old wrist mounts with her wands within them. Elie helped Miles and Hoffnung protect her husband and children and quickly defeated the forces that had been sent against them. Even though it had been some time since she had used magic, she quickly dealt with the attackers with precision. She took her family with Hoffnung and Miles back to Hoffnung's house. There, the three tried to explain to her family what was happening at the moment and the whole concept of the wizarding world in general, which was quite a hard pill for them to swallow. Hoffnung, Miles, Elie, and a few other Briarbuck students pooled their knowledge and resources together and realized that the elves were planning on doing. The elves intended to start a war with the wizards. They wanted to rise up and have the same station as the wizards, or possibly force the magical world to reveal itself to the Muggle world, hoping it would then destroy the wizards. They wanted to free the whole magical world from the oppression of the wizards. The free elves were led by a radical, hybrid, half-elf, half-fairy, which should have been impossible. However, because of the expansion allowed by freeing the elves, one elf fell for a fairy. Using their magic together, they were able to have a union, and this child with much power was created. This zealot wanted not only to rule the magical world, but the world as a whole. He was behind the free elf movement and had amassed power by using both his heritage and stealth to sow the seeds of corruption over the last 20 years. The elves had been pushing magic and were the reason the wizarding world had been off for the last 15 or 20 years. And the Briarbucks realized that this was the reason the Sorting Hat had created the fifth house all of those years before. Together, the Briarbuck House used their skills, powers, and magic to find the location of the elf revolution. They rushed in and battled the elves and tried to stop the revolution from spilling out into the wizarding world. However, the battle itself spilled out into the open and revealed to the wizards and other magical creatures the truth of the revolution. In the end, they were able to stop the revolution from seizing control of the whole world and managed to find a way to make peace and allow the elves to be free and a recognized race, not only a separate class within the wizarding world. This was what stopped the war. However, in the battle, the magical world and the wizarding world were revealed to the Muggle world. The battle had expanded beyond the bounds of any magical covering spell and out into the city of London. Therefore, in a way, the free elf movement had actually won. Hoffnung and the others helped create a bridge to the Muggle world and the Wizarding world, providing hope for the future for both the Muggles and the Wizarding world. This created a hope for a brighter future. In effect, allowing Hoffnung the chance to live up to her name, Hope. So there's the end to our little story jumping into the Wizarding world of Harry Potter and the idea of creating a fifth house for protection of the magical world, but possibly allowing it to grow into something more. As we said before, just fun ideas. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments below, knowing that there are a lot of details to the Harry Potter world that are a bit unique and hard to remember. Thank you for giving us a chance to explain our idea, but we'd happily love to discuss it going forward.